Welcome to this week's episode of Uncontested Investing. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your co-host, Nate Zilinski, joined as always by Suzanne Andreessen. And Suzanne, we're going to continue the customer service theme. It's a really important one for investors to drill home. It's how you set yourself apart in the industry. And today it's going to be all about from the first call to the closing table in creating that five-star investor experience. You know, sometimes the most important thing an investor can do is selling their property or trying to acquire a new one, right? So making sure that that goes smoothly. You know, you don't have a fix and flip without the flip, right? So it's really important and not something that we talk about often, but I think it's really crucial for the investor to know how to get that deal closed and how to get that sale. So you're earning that ROI, you're earning that profit, and you're going on to your next venture in real estate.
Absolutely. It's a very small industry, even though it's nationwide. It really is. You people know each other in this. And that's why, experience beats price. In today's market, you don't always win because you offer the highest price. You win because you offer the best experience. And I think that's something that we should all truly listen to from that. And with sellers, tenants, and partners, they remember how you made them feel. It's not just a numbers game. It's really when they walked away, how do they feel in that scenario? And certainly from a thesis, a five-star experience is a competitive advantage that drives more referrals, drives more deals, referrals, and repeat business. And that, again, we are in a very small industry collectively.
Yep, and I think that pertains to selling and buying, right? It's both ends of the spectrum. You kind of have to be really good at both as an investor, whether that's reaching out and, making sure that, the party that's selling the property, that you're very interested, or if you have a potential buyer, catering to them, always being able to, get on a call if they need to schedule that, be available for a walkthrough, right? And then there's that relationship with your potential realtor or, someone that's selling the property on behalf of the person that lives there already of what you're trying to acquire. So there's so many different niches and areas where throughout that experience, you as an investor can be best prepared and be the best option, whether you are selling a property or buying one.
Well, and that holds true, especially if you're selling an occupied asset. You need to start with your tenant. Say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm selling this. You've got nothing to worry about. Your lease is in effect, and I'm going to make sure that this transition works for you as well as the next landlord.
Yep.
And that matters. Your reputation is going to follow you forever.
Yep. And it starts with that first touch point. You got to know, is that someone that's calling you directly? Did they fill out a form and inquire about the property? That kind of lets you know they're a little bit more interested than others might be. Or was it a referral from someone right? So there's different ways to handle those communications and knowing how they're reaching out to you, I think is important. That initial conversation, discussing the property evaluation, right? Is there wiggle room? Are you trying to get them to go a little bit lower on the price? You have to be very delicate in these conversations because a blow up at the wrong time when you're talking about price could end the deal right then and there.
Well, and it's important that you try and remove the emotion from the environment. What matters to you may not matter to them and vice versa. And so just try and keep a calm, clear head through this whole process.
That offer presentation, how you're giving your offer. Are you including a letter about why you're so interested? Are you following up to say it's been great working with them so far and, this is as high as I can go? Is there any way you're willing to work with me, right? So how you present that offer can go a long way. It doesn't always have to be the exact number that's in place. But if you're supporting it with that human element, it can go a long way. From contract to close, right? So there's a journey there that the investor always has to be aware of. A lot of times investors are focusing on that middle part of just the deal and in closing it, and they get caught up in the numbers. But there is a little bit of experience surrounding it. It's how you make people feel. It's how you approach conversations. It's how open to communication you are. So there's a lot of ways that investors can win, and it's not always about that number at the end of the tunnel.
And I encourage you to think outside the box. You said something before, from maybe, if that truly is the best price that you can offer as the buyer, maybe you say, would you all consider a partial finance to this? There are solutions. Just try and think how you could resolve it without insulting either party in that scenario.
Yep. And then there's that post-close follow-up. You never know when a potential buyer or seller could come back and be a referral source for you. or somebody that can be an asset or an ally to you in the industry. So I think it's always important to check in after the deal closes, whether you win or lost. I think it's a show of good faith of like, thank you for working with me, or congratulations on securing the property. There's so many ways you can approach that post-close, whether it goes your way or not, where that professionalism just wins out. And it kind of goes back to that customer service of like, okay, wow, this is someone that I need to keep in mind if I'm ever selling another property, potentially giving them leads to something that goes on the market. So you can win in the long term, even if you don't close that deal that's right in front of you.
But even as a seller coming back and saying, how's it going? Do you any questions now that you've been here for a while? Because there's a ton that they don't realize they didn't know until they're in the deal. And I think that's a great way for you to keep an open-ended strategy, because maybe you have another asset down the road that they would like to purchase, and you already have a good relationship there.
Yep. It's the first impression that is long lasting, right? That they're going to remember you for. So the speed matters when you're responding quickly. People love that. It signals professionalism and urgency, right? Time is money in this industry. We talk about that a lot, but the people that are willing to jump on the phones, that sense of urgency and, that sense of like, okay, this person wants to connect. They want the property. They're really interested. They're going to go back time and time again. And, maybe it's that point where because you reached out first, someone comes in with a better offer. The potential seller is going to reach back out to you as an investor and say, hey, you reached out first. We've had a great open line of communication. Do you want to counter this offer that I already have? Can you put in a little bit of a better number? Or maybe if you've had a better relationship with the seller, they're like, as long as you match it, it's yours, right? So sometimes you don't have to go above and beyond. That first impression and just matching the best number is what's going to separate you and allow you to win the deal.
And we talked about the customer service experience. This holds true not just on the maintenance when you're working through your tenant experience, but it also happens just as equally important as it does on the buying, selling of the asset.
Allow them to explain their current situation. I think as much, you don't have to get too personal, but if you can discuss things other than the deal itself, that kind of goes back to the first impression of it all, where, okay, this isn't just someone that's strictly based on the transaction or strictly caring about the transaction. They're actually like looking to start a potential working relationship. You never know where that can go when you're just not focused on the deal itself.
The tone really does matter when you're having that dialogue. And I would say, empathy first. Understand, the information there, but also let the investor explain the current situation. And I think, they can say, tenant A, they're going to have a baby. Here's what's happening on their horizon. Tenant B, she's going through a divorce, but she's, been paying on time, and great tenant to have. So you want to make sure that they understand what they're stepping into, and make sure that the experience and the satisfaction that you created the foundation for moves forward in this transaction. And certainly don't just jump straight to price. It's a collective engagement. And I think that's what you want to make sure, that it doesn't happen until it closes. So you need to get to the closing table.
Yep. And you can build trust early. And I think one of the best ways to do that is going into the first call with the right mindset. It's not about closing the deal on the first call. It's about earning the second call, right? It's about opening that line of communication, letting a potential seller know that you're interested, letting a buyer know that you've received their offer, or that you're open to allowing them to come to the property and check it out, right? So there's so many different ways where you can just continue them down the funnel, whether it's seller or buyer. And that first call is very important. You don't have to get right down to the deal right then and there.
Listening is a differentiator. And that's key to, we always go back to communication as a good foundation. That's really key. Most sellers and clients feel unheard. And this is your opportunity to really figure out what their purpose is in the acquisition and how you can help them achieve. You want to sell it, but you also want them to achieve the buying side of it. And ask really solid questions. What are you trying to, what's your long-term goals? What are you looking at occupying one of these units yourself? What are you trying to achieve? Those are key opportunities for you to really understand what they're trying to do, and you can help them get there, because that's where you want to end up.
Yep. And I think a couple of those questions are, what's prompting the sale, and what would an ideal outcome look like for you? And it just boils it down to being a lot more personal, right? You can figure out how to approach these conversations if you know a little bit of the background about why the property is on the market to begin with.
Sure. And then certainly there's a couple of things that you want to identify at the very beginning. What's the timeline? What's is it something in 6 months, 3 months? or do you have to wait a whole year to get to that endpoint? And what are the pain points as you cross into that? Do they have financing obstacles? What do you, or do you have tenants that you have a couple of vacancies that you need to fill even before you achieve that, getting it on the market? Emotional drivers, we touched on this. You want to stay away from emotion. Is it inheritance? Is it stress? Is it relocation? Why are people doing this? You don't know what their baggage is coming to the relationship, and that's something you want to do your best to support, whatever that element happens to be.
Yep. And then certainly when we're talking about from first call to closing in areas where the investor can deploy customer service, I think one of those huge wins for them is the property walkthrough or the evaluation experience, right? So you always want to be professional and punctual to that. You don't want to, again, it kind of goes back to the first impression. You don't want to have somebody waiting 15, 20 minutes outside of a property waiting to take a look at it. You want to respect the property and the situation at all times. Don't maybe be smoking a cigarette outside and throw your butt in the driveway. It's something as simple as that. That gets overlooked. But you really want to respect the property. Take your shoes off. Maybe ask if you should take your shoes off. Or sometimes, we've been in those walkthroughs where they have those little things the booties that go over your shoes. Thank you. Booties is the perfect word for it. So it's things like that stick in people's minds, and remember, like, okay, this is someone that I want to show the rest of my property to, or this is someone that there's no chance in hell that I'm letting them take this property from me because of how they showed themselves in the first 5 minutes of meeting them.
But also, if you're the one who's the buyer who's going that, it's your emotion is important, but so is the seller's emotion. They may really like the Kelly green wall, even though you don't like it. That's an easy fix. You don't want to throw digs at the property that someone has put their heart and soul into, bringing up and fixing. So, subjective elements should be left out of the equation. You don't want to offend anyone that they may think that's, really important to them, but not to you.
Yep. And as an investor, you're always going to go into the property with that mindset of, what can I fix? What can I repair? How can I make this property better? You want to do that in a respectful manner, and you want to avoid the silent clipboard approach, right? Don't just walk through the property and just look at everything and then say, thank you for your time and leave. Open that line of communication, talk about how you're thinking and what you have in terms of a vision for the property, right? Sometimes people know that their property is in substandard condition and it's a little bit dilapidated maybe, and they're selling to an investor for a reason because they know the investor is going to buy it at a premium and put the work in, right? So if you want to talk about, I have such a great vision for this property, I want to restore this room, or maybe it's a property that was in a family for a long time and they're going to put another facelift on this living room and, bring back another family into it. That's something that can really connect with a seller and be like, okay, this person really cares. They're going to put the time in when it comes to the repairs and get this property back to where it should be and allow another family to come in and really create memories.
And, don't try and hide flaws that are going to be seen in the inspection. If you know that the septic field is done or whatever, or you need to replace 2 of the 4 hot water heaters because they're leaking terribly. You just say, I know that that's an issue. That's one of the reasons why we're selling it, but don't hide it, because that just creates uncertainty when it comes down to the table. It's going to be revealed, and you want to do it on the forefront, not on the back end.
And then once you're ready to present that offer, you have to do it the right way. Don't just give a number, give some reasoning, right? You're an investor that wants to turn this property into something special, right? And put it back on the market. So break that down. Talk about the repairs, some of the holding costs that might eat into your bottom line and why you think that your number comes in a little bit lower than maybe what they had. If you can explain that to them and say, this is going to be a huge undertaking for me. The market's a little bit tougher right now. Maybe their price point is a little bit outrageous. You don't have to, blatantly tell them that, but there's ways you can explain, I'm coming in lower and it's X, Y, and Z. I need to put a lot of work in this. And
you have to put work in, or you've seen that rental rates have been trending lower. And so you're not sure you're going to be able to get new tenants at this rent. And so, your buy box and your equations, here's how my formula worked out. What do you think about that equation? And they obviously know what's happening.
Yep.
So I don't think it would be a huge surprise when you try and have that discussion.
Yep. And then I think clarity is really important. The investor has a few options when it comes to acquiring a property. You can have that cash offer, right? Everybody loves quick, easy handshake, done. The cash offer can always win and be that convenient option for a seller. Or you can have that creative financing from a lender and you can give them that guarantee that I'm going to get this money. I have the deal in place with a lender. I already have a quote lined up, right? So you can bank on me getting the money. I'm going to come through for you because I have the financing, right? So you can approach that two different ways and give that seller a peace of mind depending which route you go.
And I would have the caveat when you say, I'm already approved for this X amount of money, but that only accommodates X amount of renovation.
Mm-hmm.
Are we on target for that?
Yeah.
Because if your renovation is twice that, then the deal's not going to work. So that's an easy way to say how much really needs to be done here, and please be honest, because I don't want to waste your time or mine if it's not going to work out.
Yep. And price is a huge component, but people appreciate that clarity, right? When it's like, okay, I can see this from your perspective now. Maybe I was a little bit too stubborn on where my price point was. I can see the long-term vision for this project. And because you were clear and upfront as an investor, they're willing to meet you where you're at. And
I think, and that's, again, it all comes back to the communication and how you both feel that in that engagement. Be realistic. I mean, everyone, your first offer, your first request for that price point, everyone expects negotiation to happen. You can't take offense to it.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's the communication between contract and closing, right? Once you've agreed to a deal, there's still work to be done, believe it or not, right? You still have to cross that finish line. This is the most neglected phase. It's where deals can be won or lost. So just keep all parties informed. There's some information from a legal perspective, some documents, some signatures, right? So there are some things where you need to be like, okay, the seller agreed, but there's still work to do. So keep that in mind as an investor. Updates about title, there's inspections that still need to happen potentially. And then closing expectations about, if you have that financing or the cash offer, when can they expect that money? Those are three really important things to keep in mind that keeps that transition or that transaction going smoothly.
And if you know that there's going to be a title issue, if your boundary line, if your setback doesn't, what is resolution? Say, I understand that I'm 18 inches short on this left boundary line, but I've already had that conversation with my next door neighbor. He's prepared to, accept this piece of the boundary, and we're going to give back some land on the backside to make this all work. So if you hide stuff, it's not only is going to extend the closing, it's going to create uncertainty. And that's really, you don't want to have a transaction that goes down. It's all going to come out. Don't hide it is my best advice.
And that's exactly what you want to eliminate, right? That silence is where that uncertainty starts to breed. The anxiety is what kills the deals. So using a simple cadence, right? Just, once you have that contract, be like, I'm going to check in with you daily or weekly, right? Depending on how much work still needs to get done. Just set that timeline so, they can rely on those check-ins. They can have those updates. And at the end of the day, someone selling a property, really what they want to do is, get the money from it and be able to move on. So when you're talking to them on a daily or weekly basis, they have that sigh of relief of like, the deal is still on track to close. Everything's going well. I really appreciated that check-in. I'm glad I picked this potential buyer, the investor, right? So that open line of communication all the way to the finish line is what an investor should strive for.
And even start that dialogue with them. Say, what cadence are you comfortable with? My preference is to have every Monday around noon, just a checkpoint. Does that work for you?
Yep.
And so you create that buy-in, create the acceptance, create the expectation that you want updates every week as this is moving forward.
So for an investor, there's a lot of work to do from first call to closing. There's so many pain points, potential roadblocks. Investors really need to keep up that level of customer service during this, right? And always be communicating. And where we're going to start today is handling problems like a pro, because things can and most likely will go wrong, but it's about getting it back on track. And that's how you get to the closing table, right? Don't let one little issue deter you from getting to the finish line.
And I think the best thing to do is make sure you preempt some of these things that are happening. Issues will happen. Certainly title surprises, we've all seen those. And especially when you've got, any mechanics liens or anything like that from the previous, or maybe you didn't finish paying off one of your renovations or something and didn't even know there was a lien attached to it. But stay on top of that. You've got repair surprises. That never happens. But, and that really is going to stem from your inspection. And you can't take it personally there may be things that you didn't know that are wrong that actually are wrong. So again, don't be emotional or take it personally. And finally, timeline changes. Everyone wants to do this in 60 days, but it may take 78 days. And that's okay. If there's a specific boundary to this, if your money's only on the table from a lender for however many days, you need to share that up front. Say, look, I only have so many days to complete this transaction, so I really need to keep this on time. What are the things that you think are going to be a hurdle for us to achieve? Yeah. So, and it always comes back to communication.
Yep. The experience is defined by how you respond. The fast communication is most important, right? Because as you mentioned, some of these deals do have an expiration date. They do have a shot clock. So letting, buyer or seller know that there's a sense of urgency here, or that you're willing to work with them, depending on, if it's that repair, right? If the inspection doesn't go the way that somebody wants it to, let them know that you're still interested, but it's with the caveat that this needs to be fixed in a timely manner. Or if you're on the selling end of it, okay, we'll take care of that right away. We'll edit the offer a little bit. We understand that there's some work that needs to be done here. And, are you handling that work before the loan closes or the deal closes, or after, right? Because then you have to kind of come down on price if it's something that the buyer is going to take care of, or it's going to affect the timeline if it's you, the seller, that's taking care of it.
And we know that there are specific, financial timelines like a 1031 exchange and things like that you have to follow. You cannot fall out of cadence with that. And so I just think it's important that everyone knows up front, and that both parties are prepared to work to resolve the solution.
Yeah, and own it. Don't brush it under the rug, right? Like, step up to the challenge. It's always the people that are most transparent that are the ones that get the farthest in this industry. I saw that this came back on the inspection report. Addressing it. Don't be like, okay, I hope they don't notice it, or I'll talk about that next week. I'm nervous to see how that conversation is going to go. Step up to the plate, own it, try to provide solutions. Don't give excuses. Oh, my last tenant was really rough with the property. I didn't know that there was damage to this extent.
What do you mean oil spill?
Exactly. Nobody wants to hear those excuses. It's how you're going to solve the problem and keep the deal on the rails and headed towards the closing.
The closing table experience is paramount. Everyone wants to walk away a winner from that scenario. So make it smooth and celebratory, not transactional.
Yep.
Make sure you shake hands and congratulate at the end, because that's really what it comes down to.
Yep.
And there's small touches that make it a most positive experience. The congrats message, after the fact. Personalized thank you. We talked earlier about, coming back and connecting, 45 days after. Do you have any questions now that you've been the owner? Is there anything I can help you resolve where we are today? Ensure zero confusion. The funding timing and the next steps, those are key as well on making sure you make it to the closing table. And certainly the goal is that they all walk away saying, that was a lot easier than I expected.
Yes. I think that's what every investor should strive for, whether they're selling a property or buying a new one. They want to be the highlight of the deal, right? They want to be the person that was easy to work with. They want to be the top candidate that rises. If somebody's selling you a property, right? Be like, okay, this person is head and shoulders above the rest because they're serious. They have the funding. They've been communicating. They have a vision for the property, right? So it's things like that where you can start to separate yourself from other buyers, and that property is going to be yours in no time.
That's important. Don't forget that there's business after the transaction that you can capture.
Yep.
And it's usually the most overlooked part of the process, and certainly can be beneficial for both parties.
Yeah.
And the simple system is that, a thank you message within 24 to 48 hours. The timeliness of that is important.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be like, it was an afterthought.
Yeah.
Make sure you stay on top of that. And it should be heartfelt, just not cookie cutter.
Try to personalize it. You don't want to reach out, oh, last month we had a great transaction, thank you. Right? It's got to be that timeliness that matters. You never know if you're an investor that secures a property from someone, they might have an aunt that's going to be selling their property, a grandmother, a best friend, a relative. So you just never know what it can lead to. And that level of customer service, that level of attention to detail is something that matters, because a referral is an important thing for an investor, but it's also important for somebody that's giving it, right?
Sure.
They want to know that, if they actually go out on a limb and say, you got to work with this investor, like sell them their property or sell them your property, it's going to go great for you. And then you drop the ball, that person that gave the referral is going to kind of have pie on their face. So it's really important for the investor to take care of the transaction at hand But then any referral business that they get, they even have to try to take it to another level to demonstrate why they got that referral in the first place.
But they may even have a tenant referral for you. You sold them the property.
Yeah.
And 3 months from now, after you're working on the renovations, they may say, hey, my buddy Joe wants to occupy that. Are you ready? He's really interested in that. So now you've not only sold it to him, but you found someone to put in it. There's a lot of ways to maneuver that strategy.
Yep, exactly. And then the Google review or something along those lines, I think it's important, and it can go hand in hand with the congratulatory message, the thank you, the response within 24 to 48 hours. Just drop that at the bottom very subtly. You don't really have to outwardly ask for it. Maybe it's something as simple as it's in your email address, or if you want to provide examples of other people that have left you reviews, you can say, hey, this is what people have said about their experience. Would you mind adding to this if you feel like it's worthy to go on Google and actually, talk about your experience? It would be greatly appreciated. Give them examples of what it can do for your business. Maybe they're willing to go that extra mile if you're willing to provide the proof and make it easy for them, right? They don't have to go on Google and search themselves. Give them the opportunity and the ability to review right then and there with just a simple few clicks.
And the purpose of having a positive experience is you're asking for that endorsement in the back end of it. And that really, it's again, the feedback and all that public acknowledgement is really going to help you moving forward.
Yep. And stay top of mind, like you mentioned, right? There's opportunities to check in. Obviously, you want to do it in a timely manner after the deal closes, but 3 months from now, 6 months from now, maybe a year comes up, right? And as you mentioned, that exact scenario where they're looking for a next tenant and be like, hey, do you have anybody in your family or anybody in the surrounding area that you're close with that needs a place to live? The first year of owning this property went great. Send them pictures, say, hey, look what I've done with the place. I'm really excited about the future of it. I'd even give somebody potentially, like $50 off a month on rent if you can refer me a client, like little nuggets like that. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
You also, and if you're selling investor to investor, maybe you don't know who the heating guy, maybe you have an interesting system that's intricate that your guy was really good at fixing it, but he doesn't know who it was, or who's your snow removal guy, or all those things. So it's always good to have communication lines open at all times.
Yep. And it's all about turning the great experiences into growth for investors, right? It's one thing to secure a property and come out on top, but you're leaving something on the table if you're not using it as an opportunity to expand your business, grow your reach, right? Repeat sellers are certainly a thing. So, check in. Do you have any other properties that you're looking to offload? You talked about the investor to investor communication. These can lead to referral pipelines and a stronger reputation. Those Google reviews, right? People look through those. If you have that 4.7 or that 3.9 and something's not exactly a 5, people kind of go down and see, okay, is there a 1-star lurking in here? Is there a 2-star? Sometimes people are going to leave a bad review. There's no way around that. I think a really important strategy for investors is to face those negative reviews head on and address them, right? How can I fix your experience? I'm sorry to hear that was the case. I was dealing with something else, right? There's so many ways to diffuse a negative review, and people see that you respond to the negative review and be like, okay, even if something goes wrong, they're willing to own up, or they're willing to go the extra mile to fix it. So the bad review, the problem was solved eventually.
We all use Uber. We always want to make sure that we have that 5 or 4.9, because you want to make sure that they do come and pick you up when you expect it. And so it all goes hand in hand. Your reputation is really your trading card.
Word of mouth is the lowest cost marketing channel. And where you really see that prevalent is on Airbnb a lot. If a tenant has had a bad experience, the owner of the Airbnb will go on there and say, I went out to the property as quickly as I could. I got another tank of propane for the grill, or something happened with the hot tub and I fixed it right away, or I reduced their rate for that week because something wasn't working properly. So there's ways to mitigate a negative review and still come out on top and show people that, hey, if something goes wrong, at the end of the day, I own up to it and I try to solve it to the best of my ability.
It had nothing to do with the 45 people in the hot tub.
Yep. Because honestly, I think for some cases, a negative review can actually be turned into a selling point, or you can turn that into a positive. If somebody has 5-star reviews across the board, I think people out there get a little bit suspicious in today's world of like, AI or bots or whatever, whatever conspiracy theory you want to go down of like, they must have like paid people to give all these 5 stars reviews. It's the people that are real that have like the 4.6 or the 4.4, like we mentioned, right? But once you do that research and you say, okay, they did everything in their power to make sure that it was still a positive outcome, that's somebody that I still want to work with, even though they don't have the shining 5-star review.
You made a good point where I went and got another propane tank. Maybe you forgot to check it, or the prior tenant, the stay before, left the valve on and just drained the tent. So, so there's so many things that you have to look at, but own up to quickly and say, not only did I give him this, but I also brought him, 4 steaks over to make sure they could grill that evening. So there's things that you can do to resolve that issue.
Exactly. And it's an opportunity for growth, right? If you got that 2-star or 1-star review, but that was 18 months ago, and then you have 3 or 4 reviews in a row that are all 4.5 and above, you're like, okay, that was well in the past. They handled it, and going forward, this is the average. This is what I can expect with someone. The higher level of service, the lower review was just the outlier.
And just be honest. Yep. And say, own it, fix it, and move forward.
Yep. And I think last but not least, when we're talking about from first call to closing table, it's balancing efficiency with personalization. The systems out there are able to allow the investor to have that consistency, but the personal touches create loyalty, right? So you want to have a good blend of both. You want to be able to close in an efficient manner, but you don't want to have it seem robotic, have it be automated messages that are responding to people that are potentially buying or selling your property. So sprinkle in a little bit of both, and it goes a long way.
Well, it's okay to use a template for speed, but then find ways to customize it to the recipient.
Yep.
And I think that, it shows that you've put forth the effort and valued who they were as a person. It wasn't robotic, as you said.
Yep. And we talk about how AI can be a huge beneficial aspect of an investor's business. I think the best use case is allowing AI to create a template, and then you go in and you customize it from there, right? So yes, you're getting that dose of efficiency from using, a chatbot or AI or Chat GPT, but you're also, using that personal touch of like, okay, let's make sure that the name is spelled correctly. Make sure that some of the important details are correct. Oh, we had a funny story one time we met during the walkthrough and something silly happened. Let me put that anecdote in there, right? So there's ways that you can personalize on top of efficiency, and it's that blend of both, right? It's not always speed that wins, or it's not always the longest or most accurate or most personal message that wins. It's that blend of both that really sets an investor apart from the competition.
And if you haven't tried any of the AI capacities right now, I'd encourage you just to dabble in it. I think you'll find that it gives you a really strong foundation, and you can tweak your messaging even through that initial delivery and update and make sure that it gets your personality into it, but then also find a way to then after that customize it to each person you're sending it to.
Yeah. It's okay to have not 100% trust in it, but also there are investors in the industry that, an investor out there might look up to, or somebody that's doing it better, or coaching, right? Like look for their opinion on it. Look for, have they spoken on a panel at a real estate trade show, something along those lines? Have they done a presentation on behalf of an AI company? There's got to be so many reviews out there or resources available that can put an investor's mind at ease of like, okay, I went into this extremely skeptical, but after reading a couple articles online or watching this video, I feel much more comfortable about it because a trusted professional has spoken about it, and I want to start using it now as well.
I was skeptical myself. I've ventured down the AI path now, but I think it's it took me a while to get there because I'm old school. I got the gray hair.
Yep.
But it's all good. I think it can provide a foundation, but not the solution.
Yep. I think this was a very illuminating 2-part episode. There's so many ways an investor can step in and create that 5-star experience from first call to closing table and everywhere in between. We hope you learned a lot this week on Uncontested Investing. Like, comment, subscribe to help our audience and our reach grow. We can't wait to see you next week. Thank you so much for joining Suzanne and I on this week's episode of Uncontested Investing.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Uncontested Investing. questions about today's episode or the podcast? Email podcast@rcncapital.com and make sure to follow REI Inc. magazine on LinkedIn and Facebook, and RCN Capital on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. See you all next time.